What's going on, guys? VinylicPuma here, back with another Borderlands 2 video, and today I figured we could discuss just what is the best sniper rifle in this game for Zer0. Now, unlike Maya, where viable sniping at endgame is pretty simple and that you can usually just spec for ruin and then phase lock whatever you want to snipe, Zer0's strategy for the late game is definitely a lot less obvious at first. After all, Zer0 can't really just phase lock and slag enemies like that. True, I suppose Zer0 can slag enemies with kunai and deception, but you have to keep in mind that the advantage of phase lock is that it also locks enemies in place, which when combined with the slag is perfect for sniping. The reason I point all of this out though is to mainly illustrate what Zer0 is up against. After all, Zer0 can't really lock enemies in place, and on top of that, he has to contend with either having to slag enemies up front and then snipe them, or he has to overcome that health/slag barrier of the enemies in Ultimate Voltator mode somehow by dealing so much damage that slag becomes mostly unnecessary. Obviously, slagging enemies up front definitely does work. However, and fortunately for us, there is a way to deal so much damage with snipers on criticals that we can potentially negate that massive health/slag barrier. And that is through the Critical Ascension skill. For those of you that are unfamiliar, Critical Ascension is the capstone skill in Zer0's sniping tree and works on a stack-based system, meaning that if you get a certain number of stacks of Critical Ascension, you should receive a certain amount of percentage-based bonus. For our purposes, Critical Ascension provides plus 6% to your critical hit damage and plus 5% to your sniper rifle damage per stack, and stacks are awarded to the player based on them scoring critical hits with sniper rifles. So assuming you got 10 consecutive critical hits with snipers, that yields 10 stacks, and by extension, you should be getting about plus 60% to your critical hit damage and plus 50% to your sniper rifle damage bonus. At say 50 stacks, you're getting about 300% critical hit damage bonus and 250% sniper rifle damage bonus. And of course, this can extend to even higher levels of damage potential with a higher stack count. Unfortunately, and as a counter to prevent this skill from being too powerful, Critical Ascension stacks aren't permanent. In fact, you'll need to achieve a critical hit every 6 seconds or so in order to maintain your stacks, and assuming you don't do that, you'll begin to lose stacks at a fairly significant rate. Additionally, you also have to be careful to not switch to other weapon types, as that breaks your stacks, and certain actions like fast traveling and accessing vendors can also break and remove all of your stacks as well. Now, the reason I've spent a large portion of this video bringing up all of this stuff about Zer0's challenges and skills is because we need to find a sniper rifle that's going to help us more easily take advantage of Zer0's abilities. Or more specifically, we need a sniper rifle that is efficient at gaining Critical Ascension stacks safely without actually defeating the enemies we're trying to gain stacks from. Fortunately, there is a way to do this, and that is in the form of a modest, low-level Droog sniper rifle from Vladov. Now, it's important to mention that the rarity and parts, with the exception of the barrel, don't really matter all that much here, as the most important thing we want out of this thing is the lower level. By using a lower level Droog, we can more safely gain stacks of Critical Ascension without having to worry about actually defeating whatever it is that we're shooting at. Thus, we can more easily boost our damage potential with all of the sniper rifles that we want to use. And with that in mind, a low level Droog, when used in this way, is one of the most essential or best sniper rifles in the game for Zer0, since it will actually allow you to use most snipers viably at higher levels and higher level difficulties. I guess in a way, it's weird that something that you would think would be worthless or insignificant by late game actually ends up being one of the most important snipers for Zer0 to have in the later game. It's also pretty nice that these are usually fairly easy to get too, and by the time you're at like level 50 plus, you can usually just waltz around safely in normal mode and find any low level Droog to use. So in summary, if you're looking to make Zer0 viable at higher levels, getting yourself a low-level Droog is a must, as it will allow you to easily stack up Critical Ascension and allow you to boost the damage potential of any sniper rifle that you end up using. However, at this point, I guess the question is, what snipers benefit the most from Critical Ascension? When it comes to the most damage per shot, and provided both weapons have similar critical hit bonus, the answer to that question is fairly obvious in that it largely comes down to snipers that tend to have superior base damage. As an example, and in the case of Maliwan snipers, the Maliwan Sniper with the Maliwan barrel has a tendency to come out on top of the rarer Legendary Volcano and Pearlescent Storm snipers, simply because of the fact that the Sniper has a higher base damage value. Additionally, this higher base damage phenomenon also extends to snipers that tend to have higher critical hit bonus at the expense of lower base damage. As another example, while the Hawkeye actually ends up outperforming the Trespasser initially on critical hits, you'll reach a stack count where the Trespasser totally surpasses the Hawkeye's potential, making the Trespasser, which is a quest reward, a better choice for Zer0 than the Hawkeye, which is usually acquired by defeating Verastus. So in general, try to pick snipers with a higher base damage value when you're selecting snipers to use with Zer0. This of course includes, say, Tum-Tum vs Skookum variants of the same Jacob Sniper, as the Skookum or damage variant will usually always outperform the Tum-Tum or critical hit variants. When it comes to the best damage per second sniper, I'd say you'll find that your best bet will usually be snipers that have a higher rate of fire. This of course includes adequate level versions of the Droog that I mentioned earlier, in addition to other similar Vladov snipers. You may even find that snipers with the Vladov sniper barrel, like the Jacob's Diab and Hyperion Competition, are also better on consecutive shots on the same target and can prove to be very powerful at high stack counts. However, when it comes to the best DPS sniper in Borderlands 2, I think we can all agree that it's definitely the Lyuda. After all, it's pretty hard to compete with a sniper that not only is basically an upgraded version of the Vladov Droog in its base form, with better base damage and accuracy, but it also has a listed 125% critical hit damage bonus in addition to the potential to spawn 2 additional unlisted projectiles after a certain distance that take on a horizontal formation. Assuming you could learn the proper distance at which the initial projectile splits, you could potentially hit 3 times harder than normal, which when combined with a high amount of critical ascension stacks, that's a massive amount of damage potential. Granted, you're not going to be able to get all 3 projectiles to hit in all scenarios, but even with just one of the projectiles hitting consistently at a high enough stack count, you can deal a bunch of damage. Add on the fact that you're getting this in a high fire rate format, and I think it's fair to say that most enemies are going to have a really difficult time surviving a full clip from the Lyuda to their face. So overall, and if you're going for the highest sniper rifle DPS, I'd say a Lyuda is the way to go. The high fire rate, along with superior stats to the Droog and additional special effects, easily make the Lyuda one of the best sniper rifles in the game, especially for Zer0 due to how he can boost its damage potential so significantly with critical ascension. When it comes to the best damage per shot sniper in the game, I'd say it's a little less obvious, but there's definitely a clear answer. While something like the Elephant Gun may have the highest listed base damage for a sniper, the Morningstar has an overpowered critical hit damage glitch associated with it, and other popular snipers from Jacobs and Maliwan have really good damage per shot potential, I'd have to say that it is the Pimpernel that is the most powerful damage per shot sniper in the game. This is mostly because of the Pimpernel's unique effect which, like the Lyuda, it spawns additional secondary/unlisted projectiles. However, unlike the Lyuda, where you have to properly judge distance in order to get the secondary projectiles to hit, the Pimpernel's secondary projectiles spawn once the initial projectile hits a surface or an enemy hitbox, meaning that as long as you hit what you're shooting at, the secondary projectiles will spawn. The catch, however, is that these projectiles move up and outward from the target in a star pattern, meaning that when you get the Pimpernel's initial projectile to hit, you have to hit the enemy in such a way that these secondary projectiles essentially angle up and into the enemy's crit spot. In general, the goal here is not to aim at an enemy's crit spot per se, and instead to try to get the secondary projectiles to crit. Provided you do this successfully, the secondary projectiles will help you maintain your critical ascension stacks. There's also the fact that these secondary projectiles go really well with Zer0's own bore skill, which further increases the potential damage in addition to making the Pimpernel one of the best choices of sniper rifles for Zer0. Just be sure to not to spec into the velocity skill, as that will mess up the arc of your secondary projectiles by making them arc too high. So really, and in terms of power, I'd say there are really 2 best sniper rifles for Zer0, which are of course the Lyuda and the Pimpernel. As for which one is stronger, I think it's hard to say. On the one hand, the Pimpernel is a lot easier to get, as it's a quest reward for completing the Don't Copy That Floppy side quest for the Captain Scarlet DLC, while the Lyuda has to be farmed from Gettle and Mobley in the dust. On the flip side though, and like the low-level Droog that I discussed earlier, the Lyuda is much better to stack critical Ascension with, and thus can be a better choice in situations where you can more easily rack up critical Ascension stacks against a really strong enemy that has massive health. Plus, you don't have to reset your playthrough in order to farm the Lyuda, which I think is also an advantage, even if the Pimpernel is technically easier to get. With this in mind, I think it really makes the most sense to actually recommend both of these sniper rifles, as both are so good, and compared to a lot of other weapons in Borderlands 2, both are pretty easy to get, especially when compared to something like the Hawkeye, which you have to farm Veracitas for. So if I had to pick the best sniper rifle in the game for Zer0, it would definitely be either the Pimpernel or Lyuda. Both of these things are so phenomenal, so powerful, and so useful that I can easily recommend both. So if you're looking for the best sniper rifle in the game, go with both of these in all elements, as well as a low-level Droog. Alright guys, I think that's going to wrap up this Borderlands 2 video. I wanted to do something a little bit different today to change things up a little from a lot of the top 10s that I've been doing. So if you liked this video, definitely be sure to caress the like button, click the bell so you can be notified when I upload more videos, and as always, and again, thank you all so much for supporting this channel. Take care, and I'll see you all in the next one.